Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted with your whole heart? If you have, you know how devastating it can be. Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you handled it. And while you're at it, let us know where you're watching from. We've got viewers from all over the world, and it's always amazing to see how connected we are. Today we're diving into a story that's as shocking as it is heartbreaking. Imagine building your life with someone you thought was your soulmate, only to find out they'd betrayed you in the worst possible way. But that's not all. What if the person they betrayed you with was an ex who'd walked out on them years ago? This isn't just a story of infidelity, it's a tale of heartbreak, manipulation, and an epic revenge that turned the tables in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Ted, a dedicated husband and father who gave everything to his family, only to be blindsided by a betrayal that shook his world. Ted's wife, Cindy, seemed like the perfect partner for over 19 years. Together they raised a daughter, built a stable home, and weathered the ups and downs of life. But when Cindy's ex-fiancé, Ronnie, suddenly re-entered the picture, things took a dark and unexpected turn. Ronnie wasn't just an ex, he was the one who had broken Cindy's heart years before, leaving her for a wealthier woman. Now widowed and back in town, Ronnie seemed to have one goal in mind: to reignite his old flame with Cindy. What followed was a whirlwind of deceit, emotional manipulation, and a betrayal so audacious, it left Ted reeling. But instead of falling apart, Ted chose to fight back, and his revenge was nothing short of explosive. Before we jump into the full story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Unheard Stories. Ted, a police detective with over 2 decades of service, had built a life centered on family, honor, and dedication. Known for his calm demeanor and sharp instincts, Ted had spent years solving crimes and bringing justice to his community. He was a man of structure, waking up at the same time every day, brewing a strong cup of coffee, and heading to work with purpose. To his colleagues, Ted was a role model, someone who balanced his demanding job with a loving home life. At home, Ted's life revolved around his wife, Cindy, and their only daughter, Amanda. He had married Cindy shortly after meeting her at a mutual friend's party. She wasn't the flashy, head-turning type, but her warm smile, chestnut hair, and deep brown eyes had captivated him. What made her truly stand out was her compassionate heart and unwavering loyalty. At least that's what Ted had always believed. For years Ted's world felt complete. He was a doting father to Amanda, who was his pride and joy. Their bond was unshakable, built on trust and mutual respect. Ted often took her fishing on weekends or taught her life lessons over pancakes at the kitchen table. Together, the family built a life that seemed invincible. But as Amanda grew up and moved on to college, cracks began to form in the seemingly unbreakable foundation. Cindy, a dental hygienist by trade, had always been the glue that held the family together. Warm and nurturing, she threw herself into being the best mother and wife she could be. But Cindy's life took a turn when Amanda left for college. The bustling home that had once been filled with laughter and chaos now felt empty, and Cindy struggled to adjust. For years her routine had revolved around her family, but with Amanda gone, Cindy found herself with too much time to think. The monotony of her days at the dental office, coupled with the quiet evenings at home, left her yearning for something more. She loved Ted deeply, but the spark that had once ignited their marriage felt like it had dimmed. Their love was now a comfortable routine, and Cindy found herself longing for the passion and excitement she remembered from her younger years. Cindy's restlessness made her an easy target for nostalgia. When Ronnie, her ex-fiancé, re-entered her life, the flood of memories was intoxicating. Ronnie had been her first love, the man who had once swept her off her feet with grand gestures and promises of forever. Though he had left her heartbroken to marry a wealthier woman, Cindy never completely let go of the what-ifs surrounding their relationship. Ronnie was a man who knew how to make an impression. Even in his 40s, he carried himself with a confidence that turned heads wherever he went. After his wife's passing, Ronnie returned to the town where he had grown up, ostensibly to reconnect with old friends and rebuild his life. But beneath his smooth exterior, Ronnie was a man who thrived on getting what he wanted, no matter the cost. When Ronnie learned that Cindy, his old flame, was still in town, he saw an opportunity. Cloaking his intentions under the guise of rekindled love, Ronnie began to weave his way back into Cindy's life. He played on her insecurities and restlessness, reminding her of the passionate love they once shared and painting a picture of what their future could look like together. Ronnie had no regard for the life Cindy had built with Ted. To him, Cindy was unfinished business, a prize he was determined to reclaim. Ronnie was careful to present himself as a wounded man, devastated by his wife's death and searching for comfort. He knew that by appearing vulnerable, he could draw Cindy in, making her feel needed and special. What he didn't anticipate was the sharp instincts of her husband, Ted, who could sense trouble from a mile away. Amanda, Ted and Cindy's only child, had always been a daddy's girl. Fiercely independent and strong-willed, Amanda shared her father's sense of justice and her mother's compassionate heart. She had grown up watching her parents' seemingly perfect marriage, and it gave her a deep respect for love and commitment. When Amanda left for college, she was excited to start a new chapter of her life but remained closely connected to her family. She called her father every weekend, sharing updates about classes and seeking his advice on everything from academics to relationships. Amanda adored her mother as well, but as Cindy began to change after Amanda's departure, their bond started to strain. Amanda noticed the subtle shifts in her mother's behavior before Ted did, how Cindy became more distant, less attentive, and overly concerned with her appearance. When Amanda visited home during breaks, the tension between her parents was palpable, though Ted tried to shield her from it. When Amanda learned the truth about Cindy's affair, her loyalty to her father burned brighter than ever. She was furious at her mother for betraying Ted and destroying the family they had built. Though Amanda loved Cindy, her anger and disappointment made her draw a hard line. She would support her father no matter what. These four characters, with their intersecting desires, struggles, and loyalties, set the stage for an explosive story of betrayal and revenge. Ted, the steady rock of the family, will be pushed to his emotional limits. Cindy, restless and nostalgic, will find herself torn between two lives. Ronnie, the opportunistic ex, will manipulate and charm his way into their lives, oblivious to the consequences. And Amanda, the loyal daughter, will struggle to navigate her love for both her parents while standing firmly by her father's side. This isn't just a story about infidelity, it's a tale of human weakness, the ripple effects of betrayal, and the strength it takes to rebuild after everything falls apart. Stay tuned as we dive into the shocking details of how Cindy's affair unfolded and the incredible revenge that Ted plotted in response. You won't believe what happens next. The affair began innocently enough, or so it seemed. It all started at a casual neighborhood barbecue hosted by mutual friends of Ted and Cindy. The evening was warm, the kind of night meant for easy laughter and good company. But for Cindy, the night held an unexpected twist. Amid the crowd of familiar faces, Cindy spotted Ronnie. He stood by the grill, laughing with the host, his confident posture and charming smile unchanged despite the years that had passed. Her heart skipped a beat. Ronnie, the man who had once been her whole world, her first love, was back in town. Ronnie approached her with that same magnetic charm, his voice warm and familiar. "Cindy, it's been a long time." She stammered a reply, caught off guard. I didn't know you were here. "Moved back a few months ago," he said casually. "Had to get back to my roots." "You look incredible, by the way." Her cheeks flushed as she brushed off the compliment, but the nostalgia in his voice stirred something deep inside her, a mix of longing and curiosity. They spent the evening chatting, reminiscing about their shared past. It wasn't long before Ted, who had been mingling elsewhere, noticed his wife and Ronnie sitting closely on the porch, their conversation punctuated by laughter and knowing smiles. When Ted approached, Cindy's neck turned red, a telltale sign of guilt that Ted had learned to recognize during their years together. She quickly introduced him to Ronnie, her tone almost too casual. "Ted, this is Ronnie. We were just catching up." Ted extended a hand, his detective instincts immediately kicking in. There was something about Ronnie's easy confidence that rubbed him the wrong way. But rather than confront Cindy in the moment, Ted chose to stay calm, observing from the sidelines. After the barbecue, Ronnie seemed to reappear everywhere. He'd show up at local events Cindy attended or conveniently bump into her at the grocery store. At first, Cindy mentioned these encounters to Ted in passing, but over time she stopped bringing them up altogether. Ted began to notice subtle shifts in Cindy's behavior. She started dressing more carefully, her hair styled and her makeup just a little more polished than usual, even on days she wasn't going to work. Ted's suspicions deepened when Cindy began coming home later than usual, always with vague excuses about errands or last-minute work obligations. When he asked about her day, her answers felt rehearsed, as though she had anticipated his questions. What struck him the most was the distance growing between them. Cindy, who had once been attentive and warm, seemed distracted and preoccupied, her mind always elsewhere. Late at night, Ted would hear the faint buzz of her phone as she texted someone in the next room. When he walked in, she'd quickly lock the screen, offering a nervous smile and a weak excuse. "Just Amanda checking in," she'd say, though Ted knew their daughter rarely texted late at night. Ted's unease grew to the point where he couldn't ignore it any longer. His instincts, honed from years as a detective, told him that something was off. He decided it was time to find out the truth. The first step was subtle. Ted waited until Cindy was in the shower and quickly checked her phone. It was locked, which was unusual. Cindy had never bothered with passwords before. That alone was enough to set off alarm bells. Ted's next move was more direct. He used his professional connections to do a background check on Ronnie. The results were unremarkable, no criminal record, no major red flags. But it revealed a key piece of information. Ronnie's wife had passed away the previous year. He was widowed, single, and as far as Ted could tell, looking to fill a void. Still, Ted needed more. He began paying closer attention to Cindy's comings and goings, noting her sudden affinity for evening errands and unplanned meetups with old friends. When she left the house one Saturday afternoon, claiming she was going to a coworker's baby shower, Ted decided to follow her. Ted's stomach churned as he parked a few spaces away from the cafe where Cindy had gone. From his vantage point, he saw her sitting at an outdoor table with Ronnie. They were laughing, their heads close together. Ronnie reached across the table to touch Cindy's hand, and she didn't pull away. Ted clenched the steering wheel, forcing himself to stay calm. Over the next few weeks, Ted gathered more evidence. He noticed recurring charges on their credit card for a boutique hotel in town. He began documenting her movements, taking photos and noting timestamps. Every detail added weight to his growing certainty. Cindy was having an affair. But Ted wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. He needed undeniable proof. He enlisted the help of a trusted private investigator, someone discreet and thorough. Within days, the investigator provided Ted with photos of Cindy and Ronnie entering the same hotel on multiple occasions. The images were damning, capturing their stolen moments and leaving no room for doubt. Ted spent a sleepless night staring at the evidence. His heart ached as he replayed the moments that had led to this point, the laughter they'd shared, the years of trust, the life they had built together. How could Cindy throw it all away for a man who had abandoned her once before? Despite his pain, Ted knew he had to stay composed. Anger wouldn't serve him now, clarity and strategy would. He didn't just want to confront Cindy, he wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal and face the consequences of her actions. The next morning, Ted sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee as Cindy walked in. She smiled at him, her expression as if nothing was wrong. Ted stared at her, his face unreadable, and thought, "You have no idea what I know." The stage was set. Ted had all the proof he needed, and the time for confrontation was drawing near. But he wasn't going to let his emotions dictate his actions. Instead, he was going to turn his pain into power, ensuring that both Cindy and Ronnie faced the consequences of their choices. What came next would change everything. Ted had been bracing for a confrontation, but nothing could have prepared him for Cindy's audacious proposal. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning, a rare moment when they were both home together. Ted was sipping his coffee at the kitchen table, his mind replaying the evidence he had gathered of her affair with Ronnie. Cindy, seemingly oblivious, was making breakfast. "Ted," Cindy began, her voice unsteady but determined. "We need to talk about something." Ted set down his coffee mug, his gut tightening. "I'm listening." She sat down across from him, fidgeting with her hands. "I don't want you to get angry, okay? Just hear me out before you say anything." Ted's silence was her cue to continue, though his calm expression did little to mask the storm brewing inside him. "You know, Ronnie and I were together before we met," she said, her voice trembling. "He was my first love. And when he came back into my life, all these feelings I thought I'd buried, they came rushing back. I didn't plan for this to happen, Ted. I love you, I really do. But I also love Ronnie." Ted's heart sank. The words hung in the air like a lead weight. "You love him?" he repeated, his voice low and controlled. "Yes," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But I love you too, Ted. I can't imagine my life without you." Her next words sent a shockwave through Ted's entire being. "I've been thinking," she said nervously. What if I split my time between you and Ronnie? 1 week with you, 1 week with him. That way, I can be with both of you, and neither of you has to lose me." For a moment, Ted was too stunned to speak. He stared at Cindy, trying to process the sheer absurdity of her suggestion. She sat there, waiting for his response, as if what she had just proposed was a perfectly rational solution. "You've got to be kidding me," Ted finally said, his voice shaking with restrained anger. "Do you even hear yourself right now?" "Ted, please," Cindy pleaded, leaning forward. "I love you. I love the life we've built. But Ronnie, he fills a part of me that I didn't even realize was empty. This arrangement could work for all of us." Ted stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back with more force than he intended. You're asking me to share my wife with another man? To just sit here and pretend everything is fine while you go back and forth between us like some kind of prize? It's not like that. Cindy protested, tears streaming down her face. I want to make this work, Ted. I want us all to be happy. Ted shook his head in disbelief. Happy? You think this is about happiness? What about loyalty, Cindy? What about respect? You're asking me to destroy every ounce of dignity I have left just so you can have your cake and eat it too. Before Ted could say more, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught his attention. Moments later, Ronnie walked into the house as if he owned the place. His smug smile and confident stride made Ted's blood boil. Morning, Ted, Ronnie said casually as though he hadn't just walked into another man's home. Cindy told me you'd be upset, but I think we can talk this out like adults. Ted's eyes narrowed. What the hell are you doing here? I'm here because I care about Cindy, Ronnie said, his tone infuriatingly calm. I'm not trying to take her away from you. I just think we can all find a solution that works. A solution? Ted repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You mean like sharing my wife with you? Ronnie shrugged. She loves both of us. Why should she have to choose? Ted took a step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. You've got some nerve walking into my house and suggesting this? Do you even hear yourself? What kind of man thinks this is okay? Ronnie smirked, unfazed by Ted's fury. A man who's willing to make sacrifices for the woman he loves. Ted turned back to Cindy, his voice now cold and resolute. You need to make a choice, Cindy. Right here, right now. Either it's me or it's him. But I won't stand for this arrangement. Cindy's face crumpled as she sobbed. Ted, I can't choose. I love you both. Then I'll make the choice for you, Ted said sharply. We're done, Cindy. I won't share my wife. I won't compromise my self-respect for this twisted idea of happiness. Ted, please. Cindy cried, rushing toward him. Don't throw everything away. We've been together for almost 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It used to mean everything, Ted said, his voice breaking. But you killed that the moment you decided I wasn't enough. Ronnie, sensing his victory, stepped forward. Ted, there's no need to overreact. Cindy and I can still. Get out of my house, Ted interrupted, his voice like ice. Both of you. Now. As Cindy and Ronnie left, Cindy turned back one last time, her tearful eyes searching for a sign of forgiveness. If you ever change your mind, she whispered, I'll be waiting. Ted didn't respond. He closed the door behind them and leaned against it, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. The silence in the house was deafening, but Ted welcomed it. It was better than listening to Cindy's excuses or Ronnie's smug rationalizations. For the first time in his life, Ted felt completely alone. But beneath the heartbreak and anger, a new feeling was beginning to stir, determination. Cindy and Ronnie thought they could manipulate him into accepting their arrangement, but they had underestimated him. Ted wasn't just going to walk away from this betrayal. He was going to make sure they both felt the full weight of their choices. With a deep breath, Ted stood tall and walked to his office. It was time to make a plan. Divorce was just the beginning. His revenge would be calculated and it would be unforgettable. Ted sat in his office, staring at the wall as his mind raced. He replayed Cindy's audacious proposal and Ronnie's smug attitude, anger building with every memory. But instead of letting his emotions dictate his actions, Ted leaned on his years of experience as a detective. He knew that rash decisions rarely led to victory. This situation called for strategy. If Cindy and Ronnie wanted to play games, Ted would beat them at their own. And so, Ted made a decision that surprised even himself. The next time Cindy brought up her arrangement, he agreed. It happened 2 days later, over dinner. Cindy had been cautious around Ted since the confrontation, unsure of his next move. When he casually mentioned reconsidering her idea, her eyes lit up with hope. I've been thinking, Ted said, keeping his tone calm and measured. If this arrangement is what you really want, I'm willing to try it. Really? Cindy asked, her voice trembling with cautious optimism. Yes, Ted replied. If it makes you happy, I'll give it a shot. Cindy reached across the table to grab his hand. Thank you, Ted. This means so much to me. I promise this won't affect how much I love you. Ted nodded, forcing a smile. We'll see how it goes. But behind his calm exterior, Ted's mind was already racing with plans. He wasn't agreeing to share his wife out of love or submission. He was doing it to expose the absurdity of their idea and turn their world upside down. Cindy's arrangement began the following Monday. Ted allowed her to pack a bag and head to Ronnie's house, all while masking his disdain. He even wished her a good week, though the words felt bitter on his tongue. Once Cindy left, Ted's real work began. First, he contacted a friend who worked in IT. He needed someone discreet to help him monitor Cindy's activities while she was with Ronnie. With his friend's assistance, Ted installed tracking software on Cindy's phone, giving him access to her messages and location. Next, Ted dug deeper into Ronnie's background. While his initial investigation had revealed little, Ted knew everyone had skeletons in their closet. Sure enough, his persistence paid off. Ronnie had a history of minor legal disputes, nothing criminal, but enough to paint him as a less-than-upstanding citizen. More importantly, Ted uncovered evidence of financial struggles, including late payments on his mortgage and mounting credit card debt. Armed with this information, Ted waited for Cindy's return, ready to play the long game. When Cindy returned a week later, she was glowing. Ted played along, greeting her with a warm smile and asking about her time with Ronnie. Cindy hesitated at first, clearly unsure how much to share, but Ted's apparent acceptance put her at ease. "It was nice," she admitted, her voice soft. "Ronnie and I spent a lot of time talking, reconnecting." "I'm glad," Ted replied, keeping his tone neutral. "I want you to be happy, Cindy. That's all that matters." The next week, Cindy stayed with Ted. She acted as though everything was normal, cooking dinner, folding laundry, and even suggesting a movie night. Ted made a point to be extra attentive, showing her the love and care she claimed to value so much. But every time Cindy left for Ronnie's house, Ted felt a dark sense of satisfaction. The idea of sharing Cindy wasn't just absurd, it was laughable. And soon both she and Ronnie would see just how flawed their plan really was. Ted's opportunity to strike came one evening when Cindy was with Ronnie. Through the tracking software, Ted intercepted a message Ronnie sent to Cindy. "Ronnie, this arrangement is tough, babe. I don't like sharing you with him. Can't we just cut him out completely?" Ted smirked. Ronnie's confidence was cracking and Ted planned to exploit it. That weekend, when Cindy returned, Ted casually brought up the idea of spending time with Ronnie. "I think it's important for the three of us to be on the same page," he said. "Maybe we could have dinner together." Cindy hesitated. "I'm not sure Ronnie would be comfortable with that." "Why not?" Ted asked, feigning innocence. "If we're all going to make this work, shouldn't we communicate openly?" Reluctantly, Cindy agreed and Ted arranged for them to meet at a local restaurant. The dinner was as awkward as Ted had expected. Ronnie barely looked at him, while Cindy tried to keep the conversation light. But Ted took the opportunity to drop subtle hints about Ronnie's financial issues, watching as Ronnie squirmed in his seat. Over the next few weeks, Ted began to chip away at Ronnie and Cindy's relationship. He used the information he'd gathered to sow seeds of doubt, casually mentioning Ronnie's debt or hinting that Ronnie might not be as committed to Cindy as he claimed. "You know," Ted said one evening, "Ronnie seems stressed lately. Is everything okay with him?" Cindy frowned. "He hasn't mentioned anything. Maybe he's just good at hiding it," Ted replied with a shrug. "You should ask him." Sure enough, Cindy confronted Ronnie about his finances, and the resulting argument drove a wedge between them. Ted didn't stop there. He started making subtle moves to reclaim Cindy's affection during her weeks at home, reminding her of the stability and comfort he offered compared to Ronnie's increasingly volatile behavior. The arrangement finally fell apart during a heated argument between Cindy and Ronnie. Ted wasn't present, but he heard about it through Cindy later. Ronnie had accused her of being too attached to Ted and demanded that she choose between them. "He said I was spending too much time with you," Cindy confided, tears streaming down her face. "He thinks I don't love him enough?" Ted suppressed a smile. "That's ironic, considering he was the one who suggested sharing you in the first place." "I don't know what to do," Cindy sobbed. "I just want us all to be happy." "You can't have it both ways, Cindy," Ted said, his tone firm but gentle. "At some point you're going to have to make a choice." The choice came sooner than Cindy expected. Ronnie, unable to handle the jealousy and insecurity, ended the relationship. Cindy was devastated, but Ted felt nothing but satisfaction. The man who had tried to steal his wife had been defeated by his own hypocrisy. When Cindy tearfully asked if they could go back to the way things were, Ted delivered the final blow. "I've realized something," he said. "This arrangement was never about love. It was about you wanting to have it all without considering the consequences. I deserve better than that, Cindy. And so do you." With that, Ted walked away, leaving Cindy to reflect on the mess she had created. His revenge wasn't just about humiliating Ronnie or exposing Cindy's selfishness, it was about reclaiming his dignity and proving that he wouldn't settle for less than he deserved. In the end, Ted emerged stronger, wiser, and free from the toxic relationship that had nearly consumed him. Ronnie and Cindy's perfect arrangement was never destined to last. What had started as an audacious and unconventional proposal quickly unraveled under the weight of jealousy, insecurity, and resentment. For Ted, it was a bittersweet satisfaction to watch from the sidelines as the cracks in their flawed plan widened into irreparable rifts. Jealousy consumes Ronnie. Ronnie had proposed the idea of sharing Cindy with the arrogant confidence of a man who believed he could control the situation. But as weeks turned into months, his composure began to slip. Every time Cindy returned from her week with Ted, Ronnie's questions grew sharper and more pointed. "What do you two even talk about?" Ronnie asked one evening, pacing the living room. Do you still sleep with him?" Cindy hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. "Ronnie," she said softly, "this is what you agreed to. You said you were okay with this. That was before I realized how much time you'd be spending with him." Ronnie snapped. "I feel like I'm getting the leftovers while he gets the best of you." The irony of his jealousy wasn't lost on Cindy, but she didn't dare point it out. The truth was, her time with Ted reminded her of everything stable and comforting she had taken for granted in their marriage. Ted treated her with the same calm respect he always had, even though their dynamic had changed. With Ronnie it was different. His charm had faded, replaced by bitterness and possessiveness. The breaking point came on a rainy Wednesday evening. Cindy had just returned from her week with Ted, and Ronnie was waiting for her at the door, visibly agitated. "What's this?" he demanded, holding up a receipt from a dinner Cindy and Ted had shared. "It's just a dinner," Cindy said defensively. "We had some things to talk about." "Talk?" Ronnie sneered. "Over wine and candlelight? Do you think I'm stupid, Cindy?" The argument spiraled out of control, with Ronnie accusing Cindy of being more committed to Ted than to him. Cindy, in turn, reminded him that the arrangement was his idea. "You said this would make us stronger, Ronnie," she yelled. "But all it's done is show me how insecure you are." Ronnie's face turned red with anger. "You want the truth, Cindy? I regret this whole thing. Sharing you was the worst mistake of my life." "Then leave," Cindy shouted, tears streaming down her face. "If you can't handle it, just go." And with that, Ronnie did exactly that. He packed a bag, slammed the door, and drove off into the night, leaving Cindy alone in the house they had once imagined would be their new start. The silence that followed was deafening. For days, Cindy tried to contact Ronnie, but he ignored her calls and messages. Desperate and heartbroken, she turned to the one person she thought might still care, Ted. When she arrived at Ted's condo, she looked a shadow of her former self. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and her usual polished demeanor was gone. Ted opened the door, his expression unreadable. "Ted," Cindy began, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I've made such a mess of everything." Ted stepped aside, letting her in, but he didn't offer any words of comfort. Cindy sat on the couch, wringing her hands. "Ronnie left me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said he couldn't take it anymore." Ted raised an eyebrow. "I'm not surprised. He was never the type to stick around when things got tough." Cindy looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake, Ted. A huge mistake. I thought I could have it all, but I was wrong. I should never have hurt you. You're the only person who's ever really loved me for who I am. Please, can we try again?" Ted took a deep breath, sitting down across from Cindy. For a moment he said nothing, his mind swirling with memories of their life together, the good, the bad, and the heartbreaking. Finally he spoke. "Cindy, I loved you more than anything," he said, his voice steady but firm. "For almost 20 years I gave you everything I had. And when I found out about you and Ronnie, I was willing to fight for us. But you made it clear that I wasn't enough." Cindy sobbed, shaking her head. "I was wrong, Ted. I didn't know what I was doing. I see that now." "Maybe you do," Ted replied. "But I can't forget what you did. You didn't just betray me, you asked me to sacrifice my self-respect so you could keep living in a fantasy. That's not love, Cindy. That's selfishness." Cindy reached for his hand, but Ted pulled away. "I've moved on," he said firmly. "I've spent months rebuilding my life, finding my strength again. And I won't go back to being the man who let himself be walked all over." "Ted, please," Cindy whispered. "I'll do anything to make it right." But Ted shook his head. "Some things can't be fixed, Cindy. I wish you the best, but this is where our story ends." After Cindy left, Ted sat alone in the quiet of his condo, reflecting on how far he had come. The man he was now felt stronger, wiser, and more at peace than the man who had first discovered Cindy's betrayal. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it had become a part of his journey, a reminder of what he had overcome. Ted thought about the choices he had made since the ordeal began. Agreeing to Cindy's arrangement had been a calculated risk, but it had given him the clarity he needed to see her and Ronnie for who they truly were. And while he took no joy in their downfall, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing he had reclaimed his dignity and his life. For Ted, moving forward meant focusing on the things that truly mattered: his career, his daughter, and his own happiness. Amanda, ever loyal, had been a constant source of support throughout the chaos, and Ted was grateful for her unwavering presence. As the months passed, Ted began to feel the weight of the past lifting. He reconnected with old friends, pursued hobbies he had long neglected, and even started dating again, cautiously but with an open heart. He knew he would carry the scars of Cindy's betrayal forever, but they no longer felt like a burden. Instead, they were a testament to his resilience. Ted's story is one of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately, growth. While Cindy and Ronnie's relationship imploded under the weight of their own flaws, Ted emerged stronger, choosing self-respect and personal growth over reconciliation. He had faced the worst and come out on the other side, ready to embrace the next chapter of his life. As Ted sat on his porch one evening watching the sunset with a newfound sense of peace, he smiled. The pain of the past had shaped him, but it hadn't defined him. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all. Before you go, if you found this story captivating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable tales of love, betrayal, and revenge. From shocking twists to heartwarming resolutions, we bring you the stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Ted's shoes? And stay tuned because there are plenty more jaw-dropping stories coming your way. Subscribe now, you won't want to miss what's next.